Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's important at the start to recognize the achievement that Ajay and Mr. Madok have sort of seen this year, the Centurion aspect. For a chain that is homegrown, if you want to call it, and what I mean by that is developed ground up in India. Yes, operates a little bit outside India, but largely in India. To be able to achieve 100 hotels is, I think, an incredible achievement. And I think we should give a round of applause to Ajay. And also, please communicate our congratulations to Mr. Madok.
Absolutely.
So, Ajay, you would have seen a lot of, happy times, a lot of challenges, pitfalls in this sort of game of scoring the 100. Tell us some of the highlights or some of the key learnings that you would have had from this.
A lot of the time people ask me the question of what was the grand strategy. And quite honestly, we didn't have a grand strategy. It was a step at a time. I remember when I started off in our Delhi office, we had one table in a shared office. And when I say shared office, it was shared office. And a table far smaller than one of these here. And there were 4 of us working around it. We had 2 telephones, one didn't work. And I remember I had to bribe the IT manager of the bigger company that we were working with to print out something. So I bought a Toblerone so I could get my printing up in the rank to be able to get an agreement out of the printer. So when you're working with an office that doesn't work, with things falling apart, there is really very little scope for grand strategy. But we had 3 fairly firm pillars or foundations that we started off on. Because when I sat down with Mr. Madok as we started, and this was his brainchild, I said to him, what's going to be different between us and anybody else who has a fax machine at home and who's run a good hotel? Our only credentials were that we run good hotels and large ones. So we decided amongst us on 3 things. One is that the owner would be king. And that's one of the things I learned or unlearned. We had to unlearn what we learned from our earlier organization. The second thing was develop the ability to bring business to your hotel owners. And the third was bring in people as a core group who are your people that individual owners can neither attract nor retain. And we've grown on that all along. And even today, while perhaps there should be grand strategies in place, it's very much adhere to the core values. Make sure you do your work every day, and think of something new. But we're not thinking 10 years ahead or beyond. We're saying, okay, if you're 100 now, what's the next step? How many more are you going to open this year? And the next and the next. So I think that's a little bit of it. There were many ups and downs. In the first few years, it was difficult. Sometimes even finding money to pay your people. Forget about paying yourselves. But we never went wrong even on a single month. People got paid in time. They didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And we sort of sat with new things, sat with new owners. Always thought from the owner's point of view. You cannot build and operate hotels in India unless you're thinking in the owner's shoes.
But sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there, but the Indian mind is very versatile, and owners across India will sort of add to their versatility manifold. So how do you put yourself in the owner's mind in different parts of the country?
You got to increase your versatility. And make sure you can think the same language, so you speak different languages at different times. And we have some phenomenal owners who understand what we're doing and who are extremely supportive. We have a large chunk who are by and large not so challenging to work with, and then you have a set who find it difficult to adapt to the fact that an operator is running the show, and they feel at times that they could do a better job, and perhaps they could at certain instances. So I think you adapt, you increase your versatility, and you increase your language ability.
And staying on the subject of owners for a while, have you, I mean, what changes in attitude have you seen, or the maturity of owners over the years, particularly as sort of, the younger generations have come in, and it's been a different mindset. So how have you seen that evolve, and what changes that you have made or that you would advise hoteliers to make?
Well, in my personal experience, to be honest, in the last 27 odd years, I haven't seen a great change. The youngsters are better traveled, they are more savvy, they are more influenced by their pedigree and their business backgrounds, and a lot of the time are just unable to break out of the shackles in the mold. They're too caught up. I haven't seen too many parents saying to the kids, think big, do new things, go ahead and do what you want to do. It's more in the larger families that own businesses that parents are more restrictive, and the young kid on the block is doing more of what he's expected to do, or nodding his head, than coming out with new ideas. So in my personal experience, I haven't seen a whole lot. And I worked in India and worked outside of India with our hotels. My straightforward suggestion to owners would be, if you are bringing in somebody to run your hotel, obviously he's doing something you can't, but you don't have the time for. Then within certain parameters, let the guys run the show. Are we going to be right all the time? Of course not. Are we going to be right 8 on 10? Yes. And I think that's good enough. But so be supportive. For sure, watch the numbers. It's very important for owners to watch the numbers. It's also very important. We really strongly advocate owner presence in hotels. We're not against it. I think it makes a difference. I think it makes a good difference. But don't get down to the strong nitty-gritties, and certainly don't get down to demotivating people. We are in the people business. You've got to find ways and means every day to make people who are doing their jobs feel good about their jobs. And that's what we do.
Go back to the first question. Tell us a couple of real markers that were high points for you.
Well, when we started, we were at the stage, and you looked at 4 walls that looked like a hotel. You said, let's find out what this is all about, because you didn't have very much else to do or to work on. So I remember Ludhiana, which is one of our oldest hotels now. We opened it in 2000. And way back in 1996, somebody made a phone call. We got contacted. And our owner, Mr. Kangura, he was a youngster then. He said, Ajay, I'll pick you up and we'll drive to Ludhiana. And this was peak summer, and it was a Maruti 800, I remember, which broke down in the middle of the road, and we sat and spent a couple of hours at a dhaba. And by the time we got there, it was some 4 or 5 in the evening. Barely had time to look at the hotel. And he said, look, you don't have to go back tonight. You go tomorrow. What's the hurry? And I said, I'm so sorry, but I have a 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow. I have to leave. So I got on a bus, with a very drunk bloke next to me, and that was the odor. I remember that very, very vividly even now. So those are some of the things you went through. But you went through them because I think the essence is, in any business, if you have the passion and if you have the belief that you're going to make it, the rest follows. And your prime motive cannot be making money. Obviously, businesses have to make money. But if you have the passion to say, I'll make this work, and if you then have the sincerity and the belief that it will happen, things happen. I remember my colleagues telling me when I started off, they came and looked at my office and they said, you must be kidding. I would have quit in 2 days' time. And then somebody looked at our first hotel and said, you know what, if I stretch my arms, I touch the walls. This is the Marine Plaza in Bombay. We're still running it 26 years down the line. And so on and so forth. Somebody said, what's this mid-market all about here? Mid-market is rubbish. You started off in deluxe hotels. So you went through all that, but inside you knew here and here that you're going to make things work, irrespective of those things. So I think those are some of the things I remember. Lots and lots of old colleagues. Some of them are still with us, and some of them who've sort of moved on to other greener pastures.
Yeah, so effectively, I mean, you can't score 100 without really putting in the hard work and having the confidence that you'll make it. Let's move to Indian hospitality generally. And I'm saying this on all candor. We could have been and we should be much bigger than what we are as an industry. So what is it, in your opinion, that ails our industry?
Well, I think the biggest thing we've been talking about for years and years and years is cost of land. The next thing is cost of capital. And we've been shouting ourselves hoarse, saying, call us infrastructure, give us at least 15-year loans. So you have a better, longer period to repay those loans and make your projects more viable. Hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in the next few years. We are very optimistic, but we don't know. Mr. Kachu is sitting here, and we've been knocking on doors for a long, long time now. On the other hand, if you look at the positives, the smaller cities, the smaller towns, the bigger villages are coming to life now. And you have lots of people there who have been sitting on land with family, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not going out to acquire land, because in a lot of these places, land is not cheap. And so in tier 2, 3, 4, 5, there are hotels coming up that you wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago.
Yes, you're right.
What is ailing our industry? Largely lack of imagination. If you look at our food and beverage, and I'm very much part of it, and I think we are one of the organizations that are poor in that area. We haven't really put our minds to it, because we put bodies in beds, we have rooms occupied. You look at your revenues and occupancies and RevPARs. Very few people have focused on the food and beverage element, and the freestanding restaurants are raking it in. So some people, and I have young Rajiv sitting here, did focus on the F&B and made it work. But we're still way behind a lot of the very successful freestanding restaurants, which are full every evening, which are rocking with business, and which are actually taking a lot of money to the bottom line. And we're waking up, perhaps 10, 15 years too late, but we're waking up now. But I think F&B is an area where we're leaving too much money on the table for others to take away. And there is nothing stopping us. I think the cycle goes that as room rates go up, and we're just seeing them go up, more people invest in hotels, and as they plateau off, people start to run away. And I think that's a natural part of business. People want to bet on a winning horse and not on one that's dying.
Yeah, I think you dealt with some key issues there, but my question also is that besides the imagination, as far as, let's say, F&B, or the imagination of the potential is concerned, or sort of the fire to make this an industry that's deeper, that's more successful, is there, I mean, policies, yes, and the policy aspect, the money availability aspect is undoubtedly very key. But is there something else that people should be looking at? Something that will ignite them?
I was talking to a young GM, Vikram, at the Claridge's the other day. And he said, I sent a note out to all my employees saying, what are your interests? And he said, somebody came out in accounts saying food and kitchen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of us have been talking about, and to a lot of cheers and claps, talking about multi-skilling. Have we achieved it in the real sense? Maybe 10, 20% in some cases. Because telling a guy who's working 8 to 10 hours that you spend an extra 2 hours and you learn something else, it'll be good for you in the future, doesn't work too well, and certainly doesn't work too well in the current paradigm. Nobody wants to put in those extra hours anyways. So now he's saying, okay, I'm asking my people, what are your real interests? What do you want to do other than what you're doing if you're doing accounts? And if the accounts guy wants to be in the kitchen, when I have the need and I'm dying in the kitchen, I know people, I'll say, okay, go spend a few hours there, because he can manage those few hours outside of accounts. So you're not asking him to work those extra hours to be this great martyr and be that 1% of the person who'll put in the effort to learn something else. And he's saying it's actual multi-skilling. How many of us have ever asked our bellboys to do anything else? Can the bellboy make a cappuccino? Is there anything rocket science into making a cappuccino? And in today's day and age, you don't have to worry about the temperature of the milk either. You go to the machine, you press cappuccino, it gives you a cup. Now, Have you gotten there? So I'm saying lack of imagination is what holds us back, because we're too used to doing things in a certain fashion. So if we can train our bellboys to be making those cappuccinos, and they're doing it at the Claridges, he's not here. And if you can train, if you can get the accounts guys, if you really want to work in the kitchen to understand more about the kids, say, okay, mate, and go beyond the peeling potatoes after the first 1 or 2 days. And if you can get people more interested and pay them for that, I think we have a story. Our biggest challenge in the next few years is going to be people, people, and people. There just aren't enough today. It's going to be tougher and tougher and tougher. Applies to all of us. We'll have re-engineer ourselves every 10 years. The same arithmetic, the same formula, the same chemical formula just doesn't work. It will not last long. So we'll have to think of new ways to do things. We'll have to think of adding a dimension to what we know. We'll have to look at things, doing things differently. I think that's the boiling pot. That's where we need to evolve.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thought there. One more issue there. Scale, size. Why is it that, and this is your thoughts, I mean, why is it that we in India are typically averse to scale, maybe even sort of scared of scale? We don't have, I mean, there's, to my knowledge, there's only 9 hotels in India with more than 500 rooms. None with 700 rooms plus, maybe a couple of combos, but no individual hotel with more than 700 rooms in any segment. Why are we scared of scale?
Good question. The only way you can grow exponentially or geometric progression is by franchising. You can't build and grow and add scale. That's not possible. You can have a brand and you can then try and multiply the brand and bring in.
No, sorry. I'm maybe I didn't make myself clear. By scale, I don't mean the hotel company scale. I'm saying asset scale. So why is it that we don't have hotels with 1,000 rooms, 800 rooms?
Sorry. I think it's the okay, I'll come back to what an owner said to me. They're one of the wealthiest people in the business. They're in the business of what they now call edible tobacco solutions. And he said to me, look, what is this hotel business of yours? I build a hotel today. What is my return? 6-7% return on capital. Why should I build hotels in the first place? I think what puts us back on scale is scale would have to be in the larger cities for it to be viable. Cost of land is enormously expensive. So unless you're sitting on grandfather's land and a whole lot of it, it's difficult to just take it to that scale. I would venture that most countries with very large scale would probably have easy access to capital or easy access to land or both.
So it's really the question of having the opportunity and the capital to back it rather than the mindset issue.
Yeah. And you know, hotels are you're building assets which are going to pay you over a long period of time. It's not a today or tomorrow, day after tomorrow business at all. But then if you look at return on investment, there is very little or none.
Yeah. Sorry, I stopped you on the previous answer because I wanted to specifically come to you with the question on franchising. What is your views on franchising and growth through franchising? Is India ready for franchising?
About some 24-25 years ago, there was an FHRAI convention at the Hyatt in Delhi. And I was very sort of new to India and to my role. And I was up on stage and this whole business of franchising happened. And I said, and we believed very strongly at that time, that franchising in the mid-market in India would be an absolute disaster. And when I finished, I had people wanting to lynch me, saying, how can you say something like that on stage? And I said, but I honestly believe that. And if you look at the history of mid-market over the last 25, 30 years, they haven't done too well on franchising. Now, perhaps we've conjured this up in our brains, and perhaps part of the problem is not letting go of a lot of things that are settled here. But if you can control standards and not damage your brand, and it's a tough one. And it's got to be with very strong reins on your development people, because on one hand you're saying develop more. What's your schedule? How many open hotels are you going to open tomorrow, day after, next year? And on the other hand, you know when you're going in for a certain project that these guys are not going to care a damn about your standards. It's going to hurt you. So I think if you can balance that part out and have somebody in that sign-off committee before a project is signed, very strongly examine whether the product is going to live up to your standards. You can build it. It's a tough walk, can be done.
Yeah, and US Sarovar are, to my knowledge, also doing some sort of technically third-party management. I know it's sort of in a closed-knit situation, but it's still very technically third-party management. Where do you see that going as a scale of opportunity in India?
You know, over the years, we've had several discussions with some very large companies. Starwood and Starwood, Marriott in bits and pieces, other companies. I've had discussions with the big boys from Best Western saying, how many hotels can you develop for us? So we had lots of discussions. And we said we are very keen for third party. Now, the larger company says to you, oh, but by the way, Ajay, our prices our fees are firm, fixed. There's nothing we can do about those. So how much of a haircut are you going to take? And I think that's a wrong starting point, really, because if only the operator is going to take the haircut and drop his pants and kill himself, it's not a long-term solution. So I think if third party has to grow, and it's huge in places like the US, huge, then both sides have to look at things more pragmatically to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, the math has to add up. The owner is not going to pay more than a certain amount, and it has to work for the operator as well. It just can't work for the brand owner, no question. You talked about the opportunities outside the major metros. And I think that's an immense set of opportunities. And if you see the way growth is happening in India, in the last 3 years, let's say, for example, more than about 60% of the new inventory has come outside of the metros and the main cities. And the new projects, again, very substantially so. Are there differences in approach that you have to make? Any particular learnings out of that city to a smaller place? And you've done a lot there. I think you've got almost 100 destinations too, or 90 odd destinations.
80 odd, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anything that you'd like to highlight? Any particular regions that you'd like to highlight?
I think the big factor there is your ability and your promise to develop local talent and to have high dependence on local talent from day one. And over a 5-year period, build it up to a stage when you don't need to be sending them food and beverage managers and front office managers and EHKs from across the country who don't want to be there. So if you got a plan for that, you have a great success ratio. In terms of regions, I think it's pretty much everywhere. We've been lucky, we've been blessed. We are in a lot of religious destinations. And in a lot of these places, land's available, not so expensive. People go ahead and build these hotels. And there's huge amount of demand. That demand never goes down, irrespective of what's happening in the country or the world. A lot of the smaller cities, a lot of the larger towns are really coming up. There is big aspiration there. People want to go to better dining places. People want to see better hotel lobbies. People want better venues for their weddings because they've seen it elsewhere and see no reason why they can't do it in their own backyard. So I think that growth potential is huge. And again, the numbers there are anywhere between 60 and 120 keys, and the largest banqueting you can think of.
Yeah, that's the typical size that you're seeing. I think, given the time, we've sort of got to call a halt to this session. We could have gone on chatting for much longer, but
if we have somebody from the audience who wants to ask a question, I'm more than happy to engage. Well, the first 20 are always the longest. By the way, Rajiv Kaur and I started our hotel careers together with the Oberois in 1978. Yeah, for the first 10 years, Sarovar had no hotel presence in Delhi. And I was sitting in Delhi myself, and everybody used to ask me, hey, but where's your hotel? And I said, oh, I've got one in Bombay, and I've got one somewhere else in Chennai and Bangalore. But 10 years, we didn't have a hotel. Today, we have 12. The first few years were tough because you were still building a presence, you were building reputation, you were building a level of dependability. It's difficult. And after the first 50, it sort of snowballs and it gets more and more and more. We even ventured into Africa. At one stage, we were running 6 hotels in Africa. Now, without a presence anywhere in Africa, for an owner there to trust you to run his hotel when you're sitting thousands of miles away is a tough one. But we manage those. We're still managing that kind of scenario. So I think yeah, you're right. Once you have the size, it becomes a lot easier. Yep.
Yeah, you get clustering opportunities, absolutely. And that's going to be your cost efficiencies, your management efficiencies coming in. And again, I mean, to Rajiv's point and to Ajay's point, the first 10 years, which would be up to, let's say, 2005 or 2006 or something around that, the scale in India itself was very small. I mean, in 2001, we had, I think it was 21,000 or 23,000 rooms chain affiliated. And maybe by 2005, we were at about the 35 or 40,000. So it's only then that the industry has grown in a larger way, not the scale that one would want, but in a larger way. And I'm glad you've got a good share of that. Any other questions?
I have one other question. Just curious, what exactly has happened to your construction costs pre and post COVID?
Higher by about 30-odd%. 30.
Higher by 30%. Okay. Listen, that's the red. We have a red carpet here, but there's a red screen there saying time's up. So,
can I have one question, if possible, please?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thanks very much. For an emerging management company like mine, the biggest challenge that we face is how to get the money out of the owners, especially when now the bank accounts are being handled more and more by the owners, and they like to do that. What are your views on that, and how can a company ensure their money like this?
I could write a book on that, but
I can co-author it with you.
And it doesn't matter how big you are. That's one of the issues in India and any business, not just in the hotel business. Well, you have to be shameless. You have to be thick-skinned. You have to ask. You have to ask again, and you have to ask again. Sometimes politely, sometimes impolitely. And then you have to have the courage to block off the reservation system, etc. If you are providing business, if that's the lifeline, and you say I'm going to shut it off tomorrow, sometimes it pays you off faster. But you have to be perseverant, you have to be persistent, and you have to do it yourself. You can't just leave it you can't be embarrassed about asking for your money. I keep telling my team all the time, it's our money. Why are you embarrassed? So ask again.
And have you walked out of a contract because of that? Sorry, a pointed question, but
it would have to be very rare. Very, very, very rare.
Got it.
But the other trap is don't let the outstanding build up to a level where you can't walk out.
Got it.
And if you've got a situation where you've got to walk, I would imagine that the relationship has been fractured on multiple counts rather than just the fact of money. And if that's the case, then that's a different situation. Sure. But if you're providing quality and value on a consistent basis, and sometimes you need the perseverance, as Ajay said, you will get your money.
Eventually, yeah. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay.